If humanity had never invented nuclear weapons, the trajectory of the 20th century and beyond would look profoundly different. The Second World War would have likely ended with more conventional bloodshed, requiring the United States to invade Japan through a brutal and costly land assault rather than forcing surrender through atomic devastation. Millions more soldiers and civilians might have perished in prolonged island battles and fire bombings, and Japan's eventual collapse would have been slower, reshaping the global balance of power. Without the fearsome shadow of mushroom clouds, the Cold War would not have been defined by the delicate balance of mutually assured destruction. Instead, the United States and the Soviet Union would have continued competing with tanks, aircraft, and conventional missiles, pouring vast resources into armies and navies rather than stockpiles of warheads. Proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and elsewhere might have escalated further, since superpowers would not fear that every conflict risked spiraling into nuclear annihilation. The planet would have witnessed larger-scale conventional wars, stretching on with higher casualties, but less of the apocalyptic terror that restrained leaders in our timeline. The world order itself would shift. International institutions like the United Nations might have been weaker because their authority partly relied on mediating the nuclear standoff. Nations without nuclear deterrence, countries like Germany, Japan, and South Korea, would be far more vulnerable, relying entirely on alliances for protection rather than a balance enforced by atomic umbrellas. On the other hand, smaller states would not live under the constant threat of annihilation, and anti-nuclear movements would never exist. Instead, peace activism would likely focus on curbing chemical weapons, biological warfare, and the devastation of mechanized armies. Technological development might have followed a different pace. Much of our modern energy research, rocketry, and even medicine stemmed from nuclear physics. Without the Manhattan Project and its aftermath, nuclear power plants might not have become widespread, slowing advances in both clean energy and radiation-based medical treatments. Space exploration, heavily accelerated by ballistic missile technology, might have progressed more slowly as well, leaving humanity decades behind in reaching the moon or building satellites. Yet the absence of nuclear weapons would also spare generations from the psychological weight of Armageddon. Children would not grow up practicing duck and cover drills, and societies would not live with the dread of instant obliteration. Art, culture, and politics might have been less haunted, more focused on immediate struggles than on existential threats. Still, the absence of nuclear deterrence carries its own dangers. Without the terror of total destruction, leaders might have felt freer to unleash massive wars. A direct confrontation between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, which in our world remained unthinkable due to the nuclear risk, might have exploded into a Third World War fought with tanks, jets, and chemical weapons across Europe. The destruction would be staggering, but not final. Cities would be flattened by firebombs, not by radioactive blasts, and the environment would be scarred but not poisoned for millennia. Humanity might cycle through repeated global conflicts rather than maintaining the fragile peace imposed by nuclear fear. In such a timeline, the story of humanity would be one of relentless war and reconstruction, not the uneasy standoff we know today. The 20th century would not be remembered as an age of nuclear terror, but as an era of endless, grinding battles where no weapon was decisive enough to stop them. Civilization would march forward, not in the shadow of extinction, but under the weight of constant conventional wars. A world both less terrifying and yet, paradoxically, perhaps even bloodier.